What do you get when a legless lad and a blind bloke walk into a bar? A couple of mates on a mission to challenge what it means to be tough.
Righto, welcome back to another episode of Talkin Tough, proudly brought to you by Ski for Life, an incredible South Australian charity dedicated to promoting mental health, wellbeing and suicide prevention. Mike, how are you, mate?
Oh, I'm fantastic, Ben. Thanks for that great introduction, mate. It's good to be here, as always, for another episode of Talkin Tough. I'm pumped. Today is going to be a fantastic episode. So much relevance for the people listening, particularly blokes, particularly people in agriculture. We get to hear from an amazing guest and get some really practical, real-life tips on how to get through the tough stuff. Yeah,
bloody oath. And like you said, mate, this guest is someone we have been looking forward to having on the podcast for a long time. Only problem is she hails from Dalby in Queensland, and crossing paths when we've got our schedule on the road and she's got her schedule on the road is something that is a little bit tricky, but we've managed to make it work. We're in a different spot today. We are on the couch at home, and we have Mary O'Brien here with us from Are You Bogged Mate? Mate, how are you?
I'm bloody fantastic, boys. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, Mary.
It's good to catch up with you guys.
Absolutely.
The stars aligned with the sun, and there was a bit of an eclipse going on there, and we managed to cross paths, and you are sitting on the...
Mars, Jupiter.
Where have you come from? So all the way from Bendigo today down to Melbourne, and then back to Bendigo, and then God knows where. So you're off and away. How often do you spend in Dalby?
Maybe about 2/3 of the year.
2/3 of the year?
Roughly. But, yeah, a third or a little bit more I'm on the road around the country, so... Always down the southern parts this time of year. So, yeah.
And how many Ks, if you had to take a wild stab in the dark, how many Ks a year would you travel spreading the message of Are You Bogged Mate?
Surprisingly not as many as people would expect, because we make them very efficient runs, and so plan our trips very carefully to keep the costs down and, do a big run. So this trip I left home, on the 1st of March and get home on the 24th of March.
Yeah, so nice three and a bit week stint on the road. Like you say, nice and tight. And how many events in that 3-week period?
Oh, you're pushing me now. I'd have to look at my calendar.
A few.
But quite a few. Quite
a
few. The first week was very hectic.
Yep.
At least one every day for the first week. And that's, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, like right through.
Yeah.
Right through.
7 days a week, doesn't stop. Mate, we are, like we said, pumped to have you on, and I reckon we're going to get stuck into the whole Are You Bogged story a little bit later on, because we want to start with you. We want to find out. Yeah, that's it. Strap yourself in. We want the listeners to learn about who Mary O'Brien is and, the person behind Are You Bogged Mate. But to start off, we start off in all of our episodes by asking you a question and thinking back to when you were growing up. What did tough mean to you? What did tough look like? Who was tough in your life?
Dad was tough.
Yep.
Tough to me was those blokes who could keep doing stuff even though they, pretty much had half an arm severed. They were bleeding and they kept doing stuff. And I guess in my teenage years I was very big fan of rugby league.
Yep.
And
Who did you follow?
Followed the rugby league very closely, like could tell you every player that played for every team, and I could tell you the scrum weight, I could tell you their age, everything.
Right.
Of every player.
Who was your team?
Well, Brisbane Broncos.
Yeah, well, I'm just making sure.
So we're talking Wally Lewis was a big hero?
Yeah.
Back in the day?
Yeah, the king.
And the king, obviously.
You haven't been converted to the Dolphins?
I've got a bit of a soft spot for the Dolphins. Because my good mate Petro Sevenasiva is involved with the Dolphins. And,
wasn't he a great player?
Oh.
Brilliant.
And an even better man.
Yep.
So
and you obviously you're talking about, you went from, your dad and you're talking about rugby players, but obviously in your eyes, growing up, you looked up to these people that you knew and you loved so much, these rugby stars as tough people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also my grandmother as well, to throw some women in there, but particularly my grandmother, because she lived in an age where there was no electricity, there was no flushing toilets, there were no washing machines. She had 9 children and quite frankly, they're little mongrels, all of them. Just absolute.
9 children gives me the shivers.
I know, just makes my blood run cold. And so without any of those modern things that we have of electricity, running water, like she's carrying buckets of water, 9 children, washing by hand, like that sort of stuff just
Did you ever
blows
hear her
my mind. And
complain?
she didn't even kill any of them. That's the miracle right there.
It's a miracle. Do you ever hear her complain?
Oh,
about anything?
she did. She did. Well, according to them, she did a bit. But that that sort of toughness in those women in the early days of the conditions or the living conditions, and that was just wow, just blew my mind.
Yep.
I
And
reckon it'd test a few people's toughness today if all of a sudden the world was rewound about 50, 60, 70, 80 years and we all had to live like that. I think everyone has an absolute freak out these days when you don't even have internet for 24 hours, let alone water, let alone electricity.
Well,
It's
my
a
mother tells the story
wild
of
world.
like, these kids were so sheltered out in the bush, they didn't really know where babies came from or whatever. And they knew that mum was fat and their grandmother was there because this baby was due, and grandma chased him up the paddock with a broom, said, get out, go on, up the paddock, because my grandmother just sort of went into labour in the hallway. Wow. And grandma said to the kids, go up the paddock and don't come home till it's dark. And when they came home, they had a new baby in the house.
And they would deliver in the house?
Yeah, she just delivered the baby in the house. There's no hospital. There's none of that stuff.
So no doctor either?
No doctor. My great-grandmother delivered.
And how do they learn that skill? That's fascinating. So how do they...
How did the species
and how do
survive?
they, but how well, from a safety perspective,
Yeah.
so they would have known what to do in childbirth and did it 9 times.
Yep. And so that was just well, some of them, like some of the later children were born in a hospital, but when she went into labour that quickly and they just didn't have time to get to the hospital, and my grandfather worked out on the station and there was no way of contacting him on a phone or a radio or anything to get him back.
It'd be a surprise for him when he comes home and goes, oh shit, here's another one.
Here's another one. And it was, so that's that sort of toughness that, geez.
Yeah.
Because we know now, like, if the power goes out, we're like, oh, what?
Yeah.
And that's just the electricity.
And not to mention the whole, even having kids process these days, and I'm talking from a city perspective, but like there's quite a lot of intervention. That what you just described there is zero intervention.
There's no gas or epidurals out there in the hallway.
That's quite amazing.
But not only did she have to have all these 9 children and put up with their bullshit, but she also had to teach them because there was no schools. So it was
Homeschool,
So it was all correspondence.
And feed them as well.
Yeah,
that would have been
and
a bit of a
feed 'em.
challenge at the same time.
Yep, and correspondence. And I think someone in my family mentioned that she might actually be listed in the Stockman's Hall of Fame of having like the longest run of correspondence, ever taught correspondence. I think it was 27 years,
Between the first kid starting and the last kid finishing.
Yep, teaching correspondence. You imagine that. That's enough to push you over the edge.
And that's something when, like, she's growing up. It's not like she goes, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher.
No.
It just comes with part and parcel of the job and the life and the land.
Yeah, yep. So that's pretty tough too.
Yeah. Women on the land are tough.
When we were doing one of the Mates on a Mission trips that we did, Talkin Tough tours and Mates on a Mission that Benny and I do, we went across to the Barossa and we heard that story about the Sepulsville winery and the matriarch that had 21 children. And because there was all the Lutherans went to the Barossa and they were basically like they didn't have access to workers and whatnot, so she basically had kids,
had the workforce.
and
she bred a workforce.
She bred a workforce.
As well as a footy team.
And as well,
22.
in relation to your experience, like having 9 kids, what's the expectation in rural regional on the kids, not just to grow up and to go to school and to do things nowadays, but back then was the expectation that they pitched in, they worked on the farm and they helped, and there was a lot of, obviously regimental work that they were, expected to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my mother's the eldest of those 9. And then so there was 2 girls, my mother, and then the next in line was another girl. Now,
and then 7 boys.
No, then there was 5 boys.
Okay, yep.
So we joke about it in our family. There were 2 girls out to steady the lead, and 5 boys, and then 2 girls to bring up the rear. So, so 5 boys in the middle. But my mum sort of became the washerwoman, and so her education sort of dropped off because she had to do the washing for the family. And so, I tell you what, ever got a stain on anything, there's nothing my mother can't get out.
Wow.
And then her sister became the cook. Now the boys still call her Cookie because she became the family cook, and so their education sort of dropped off once they got to 10 or 11 because they had to take on those roles. So one was basically did all the washing, and the laundry is Mum's happy place. She loves washing. She washes everything.
Even now. And so your mum's the eldest, and then she has you. Have you got siblings as well? How many in your family? Big family?
4.
4?
Yeah, so I've got an older brother and sister and a younger sister, so 4 of us.
Yeah, which sort of brings us to a little bit more focused on you. Tell us about your life growing up and sort of going from a whippersnapper to where you are now. How did it sort of all play out?
It's a wiggly, windy, rough road.
Hey, well, let's start at the start and see how many turns we take.
So, born and bred in southwest Queensland.
Yep.
And grew up on a sheep and cattle station and did school of the air correspondence. So Mum taught us. And again, my older brother and sister, there's a sort of 7-year gap between them and me, and then there's myself and my younger sister. So Mum actually taught correspondence for 17 years, which, she did nearly kill us. Or we nearly killed her, one of the two. But, went away to boarding school and just wanted to go back to the bush. And so I did.
Yep.
And
how'd you go at boarding school? I don't pick you as a boarding school kind of...
No.
Like an academic, studious student.
Well, it was that standard thing on the report card, if only she applied herself.
Potential.
She has great potential if only she applied herself. But in those days, I was really only interested in watching football, attending football, drinking beers and chasing boys.
Yep.
And that's pretty much how I did it. And the teachers used to say, in year 12, somehow I managed to stay there that long. Oh, so Mary, what are you going to do when you finish school? And my answer was the B&S circuit. That's what
that is my goal.
That was my goal.
Sorry, forgive me. The what circuit? What is this?
The B&S ball circuit. So
B&S ball.
Yeah.
So for Mike being a city boy, bachelor and spinster ball circuit.
Oh, fair enough.
Where your young single blokes and your young single women from the bush would get together and
how long were you on tour?
Play up.
How long were you on
play
tour?
up like second-hand lawnmowers.
And did you meet your husband? Or I'm making assumptions here, but no, you didn't.
No.
Okay.
No, I actually knew him all my life. He was next door neighbour.
There's a story in itself.
So then went back to the bush and got married very young and had a couple of kids, and then wool crashed.
Okay.
So the wool market completely crashed, and there was just not a living out there for. This was the era of shooting sheep. This is when we had this massive stockpile of wool in Australia, and people who owned sheep were told to shoot their sheep, and there were thousands, hundreds, millions of sheep shot. It was an era
just to
where
survive.
because they couldn't sell them. You couldn't even afford to put them on a truck to take them to the sale yards because they were worth nothing, 50 cents.
Yeah, and it was costing more to keep them.
It was costing, yes, and you couldn't sell the wool. It was just diabolical.
And so you and your husband were in the wool. Obviously, that's what you did exclusively.
Yeah,
so when
wool industry, yeah.
When it all went to the shit.
What we were on a property with his brother and sister-in-law, and so 2 families on one property just wasn't going to work. So we moved to Toowoomba.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's, when we left out at Cunnamulla. But it's, that shooting sheep era in Australia was just massive. And when you actually drill into the suicide data, you'll see that bump, that increase, because there were so many men that dug massive holes, shot thousands of sheep and then turned the gun around.
There's their livelihood.
It was huge.
Everything they've worked for.
It was huge. Yeah, it was a massive thing.
That was going to be my next question, but you've sort of answered anyway with the impact from a mental health point of view that era had. Like you say, I think back then even probably the statistics aren't as accurate as they probably as they probably were if we were in today's day and age back then, because a lot of suicides were
recorded as farming accidents.
Farming accidents and put down to a range of different things and hidden from families, hidden from the community.
Wasn't talked about.
There was a lot of shame around it.
Yeah, that's right. There was. Definitely.
Was there many from your community? I suppose that sort of leads into...
No, but sort of neighbouring communities and I guess the Bush Telegraph being what it is, the grapevine, is well watered out in the bush. So we heard of a lot of people.
Yep.
I don't recall anyone personally that we knew in our close area, but there were certainly, didn't have to go far to find them.
Yeah, right. And then from there, you move into Toowoomba.
Yeah, moved into Toowoomba and thought, I don't have any qualifications or any skills to get a job. I can pick up 1,000 lambs a day and then drink a carton of beer at the end of it, but that's all. I can ride a motorbike. I can muster sheep.
So what'd you do, Toowoomba?
So back in those days, they actually had what they called adult learning courses at TAFE at night, and so you could go in on a Wednesday night for 3 hours and just learn different things, and you could sign up to all these different courses. And I signed up to do. I did everything from hospitality. Computers was becoming a thing.
Yep.
We didn't have computers when I was at school, so I learned everything like how to turn it on. This is the button to turn it on. To
I thought kids were just born with that these days.
They might be these days, but
my 3-year-old knows how to use a phone better than I do.
You can program it.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. So you ended up doing the adult learning.
Yeah.
And what were you learning about?
computers. So I did spreadsheets, I did Word documents, just all that sort of stuff. But everything from
So
this
a
is how you
massive
turn it on.
change from looking after sheep to all of a sudden you're doing
huge.
spreadsheets.
Huge, because you couldn't. There was nothing in the city that would utilise my skill set of riding a motorbike and picking, chasing sheep.
Yeah.
So really had to get some new skills. And a friend of mine, she had been working in the bank for years, and again, no computer experience at school, but she had computer stuff at work. And so she decided to sign up and do a business degree at university. And, there was still, we were still early 20s and young, and so she'd be out partying, and then she'd have this assignment to do, and she was like, oh, if I come out to your place, can you help me with this assignment? I said, how? I can't do it. How can I do an assignment? I don't go to university. I wouldn't know where to begin. Anyway, she came out and we spent the day writing this assignment, and we got 98% for it. I was like,
Awesome.
maybe this isn't as hard as I thought. Maybe
uni is for me.
maybe I could do this.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, I'm going to do something at uni. So they said, show us your TE score in those days. And I was like, well, that looks like a blood alcohol reading, so that's not going to get me very far. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, biology. That was the one thing at school that I never had to study for and I could do.
Yep.
Do a science degree. And they said, right, well, you have to sit this stat exam, which is an IQ test essentially. And they let me in.
Nice.
How many years? 3?
It's a 3-year degree, but I did it part-time because I had 2 little kids that hadn't started school. So I
2 little kids studying part-time, you get your degree.
Yep.
Where does that lead you?
finished the degree and went into Queensland DPI, the Department of Primary Industries up there, Biosecurity Queensland, and as a inspector, so grassroots base level stuff. And then there was the job for the new kid is doing all the filing, and there were all these files in the filing room on top of the cabinet that no one had touched. I said, oh, where do these go? And they're like, oh, they're not finished. And I said, why aren't they finished? And they said, oh, they're spray drift. And so I sort of fell into the spray drift role there in the chemical use side of it. And, yeah, worked my way through that. And before I finished up at Biosecurity Queensland, I was a senior scientist for product integrity, so the chemical use, so ag and vet chemicals in Queensland. So,
And what did that job sort of have you doing? Are you starting to travel around doing that?
yeah, so once I got to that level, I was training other inspectors to how to investigate spray drift cases, I guess, because there was very little skills within the department in that space of what to look for and understanding nozzles and pressure and all of these different things that go with spray application in farming sector.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you got to meet a hell of a lot of farmers, like face-to-face, toe-to-toe conversations with people every single day.
Yeah.
So let's jump forward a little bit and talk about Are You Bogged Mate? How did that journey begin?
So I essentially became fairly well versed in the spray application stuff, and then left DPI and started my own business travelling around Australia training farmers and spray applicators and how to do stuff because I was seeing the same common problems all the time in DPI of my job was to basically go and knock on their door, tell them they'd stuffed up, drag them into court if I could prove it. And I saw the same problems all the time, and I thought, well, surely it's better to teach them how to do it properly rather than just rouse on them when they've stuffed it up. So I was travelling Australia doing that, spray application talks everywhere. And by this stage I was living at Dalby, and we lost 2 guys to suicide in 3 weeks in December 2017. And they were prominent blokes in the area that people knew, and one of them I knew fairly well. And I guess it's just that impact of watching the region sort of go, what happened there? And I said at the time, if I had to make a list of 3,000 blokes I thought, and farmers, that I thought may take their life, these blokes wouldn't have made the list. So
so no warning signs.
No, well, not
that you saw.
Not that I saw, or not that I knew of, and I didn't know what to look for anyway. So I guess the confusion around that and the reeling of and just watching blokes I knew really well going, what happened here? Put me on a bit of put me on notice to go, well, you travel the whole country and all you do is talk to blokes, mainly farmers, and you don't actually know anything about this. You don't understand it. So maybe you better do a course. Maybe you better read up on this and learn a bit about it. And, maybe you need to do a mental health first aid course or something. And so I started doing all this reading. And I didn't like what I read.
What sort of stuff you're reading that you're not liking?
So all the stuff on particularly men's health and rural men's mental health, and I guess it was the attitude, and it wasn't even that they said it in so many words, but the attitude in everything I read was that there was something wrong with men, that men don't do this right, men don't do that right. And I just thought, this is bullshit. They don't understand these men. I've spent my whole life working with these men, and there's nothing wrong with them. You just can't communicate with them.
Yeah, they just operate differently.
They just operate differently. And I always say this about my spray talks, because blokes would come to my spray talk and say, I've never heard this before. And I said, yes, you have. You've been to all these other courses. And I'd list some of them off. And they're like, yeah, I've been to 3 of his or whatever. And I said, it's the same information. I'll just explain it differently. And so, after, I guess, reading all this stuff, and I just thought, this is wrong. And at the time, one of the jobs I was doing was a little bit of freelance stuff for an ag magazine. And I said to him, we need to write something. We need to do something about this mental health stuff. And, are you open to having an article like that in the magazine? And the editor said, yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah.
And he said, who's going to write it? I said, oh, I don't know. I'll find somebody who knows what they're talking about. And then that's what I was trying to find people. I was like, no, that's not a fit either. And just in my frustration, I sat down and I wrote that article, the Are You Bogged Mate article, and because I thought, I'm pretty bloody sure I can explain it better than these other people with degrees in psychology are doing. So that was essentially what I did, was in my frustration, sat down and wrote that article, just an opinion piece on it.
No different to the conversation you had at the spray drift talks, where you're going, but you have heard this before.
Yeah.
You're looking up all that shit online, and you're going, well, if I put this in an ag magazine article, everyone's going to read it and not know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When we're just reeling off stats and the way the brain works and
how to communicate, all these things. And I thought,
all this stuff, and it's like, well, that doesn't relate.
It doesn't relate.
That's half the issue in the first place.
And so that was where the article came from, of just my frustration with the way the professionals in this space were dealing with it, or trying to deal with it, or trying to reach these men. And I was like, you're missing them. Then they're not even going to come to your talks, let alone sit and listen or take it in,
so
because
I had
you're
an
not cutting.
incredible richness of experience that you're bringing to the table, and you're basing it off the countless conversations you've had from a professional context.
Yeah.
But then you're actually putting a mental health spin on it as well.
Well, just take away all the fluffy bullshit and give them practical, user-friendly things. And I mean, communicating with these men is something I've done naturally all my life, but particularly with the spray drift stuff, some of it's fairly complicated scientific stuff, and it's not that they're silly, but they need it explained in a practical way, and they tend not to learn by reading. They tend to need to see things to believe them and understand them, and so that's why using that bogged analogy works so well, because they understand what that is.
Yeah,
they understand that when that
machine's
bogged, we can get it out. we don't just set fire to it and walk away. We take the time to get it out. And that was the analogy in that article that, and again, I just wrote that for that little ag magazine essentially, and I put it on my website and I put the link out on Twitter. And in the spray world, I had so many farmers around the country following me, and I've been to the US and Canada to talk about spray application and drift management over there as well. And it just went viral. And I thought, whoa.
For all the right reasons
didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And it was pretty quick, wasn't it?
Instantaneous. It just went nuts. There were blokes all over the world, and particularly in Australia, retweeting it and saying, things like, if you read nothing else this year, read this.
Yeah, amazing.
I got emails and messages through my website and through Twitter, all my social platforms, from blokes all over the world, and some of them spent, an hour or more writing out their story, telling me their story.
Amazing.
Never met them.
Are you still receiving people's stories all the time in the work that you're doing?
Yep. Yeah.
So people obviously,
the response to that was just, the response to the article was just, wow. So many blokes just wrote, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Or finally someone understands us. And I was like, holy shit. I didn't expect that sort of response. So.
And so after that, was that the switch? Was when you said this there's something in this, and then you get out there and you go, this has become your life mission now.
Yeah, it well, I didn't even plan to switch then. It wasn't even then. It was sort of forced upon me because we were going into like a hideous drought. We were in a bad drought, and so there was not much spray work. So I had a bit of time on my hands, and people would say, "Oh, can you come talk about?" If I was doing a spray workshop, they'd say, "Oh, at the end of the workshop, can you talk about being bogged for 5 minutes?" I was like, "Oh yeah, righto." But it was when I first wrote the article, and one of the farmers, he's a farmer on the Darling Downs, and he sits on my board of directors since the beginning and still does. An amazing man, and he at the time was the president of Queensland Farmers Federation. And he just rang up for a chat one day. He said, "Oh, what have you been doing?" This is probably a week or so after I'd released that article. I said, oh, the usual, just making heaps of unpaid work for myself. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, that bloody article I wrote's gone crazy." I said, "I'm just spending all my time replying to blokes on email." And he said, "What's it about?" I said, "Mental health." Now, he's a big advocate for mental health and always has been. And he said, "Send it to me." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'll do that." He said, "No, now. Email it to me now." So I sent it to him. He's like, "Right, I'm going to read it." He rang me back 20 minutes later and he said, "This is what you do now."
Wow.
I said, no.
I do spray drift.
I do spray drift. I don't have any qualifications in this. I don't know anything about this. He said, "This is what you do now." So he was very instrumental, and within 3 weeks, I didn't know what was happening. Within 3 weeks, he had me sitting in the private boardroom of the Minister for Agriculture in Brisbane, trying to explain where I want to take this. I didn't know where I want to take it because I didn't mean to do this.
Hey.
And so I went into my local country clothing wear. I was like, okay, I can't just wear like a business suit to this meeting with the Minister for Primary Industries. You've got to look a little bit country, but not too rodeo kind of thing. So anyway, I went in there.
You can't go full BNS.
So I polished my boots and I put on some, not too faded jeans, and I had this, what I thought was a nice shirt. I get down to Brisbane and my daughter, because I could not drive into the centre of Brisbane and park somewhere. I was like, I don't know where I'm going. So I drove to where my daughter lived, and she just dropped me in there. Anyway, when I pulled up there, she's a smart ass, she is. And I jumped out and she's like, "Are you wearing that?" And I said, "Yeah, don't you like it?" She said, "Well, put it this way, you won't need to take business cards with a memorable shirt like that."
Come on, give me a visual. Can you remember it?
Yeah, it was just like a white shirt and it had navy and blue sort of paisley pattern on it.
Yeah, right.
I said, "I didn't think this was too like rodeo." She's like, "Yeah, no, that's cowboy up, that one." So anyway, she didn't think the shirt was appropriate. But yeah,
too late now.
Yeah, that was.
Thanks for the honest feedback, though.
Yeah, no, I was like, yeah, ow.
So you went in there anyway.
And
made a big impression by the sounds of
well,
things.
no, I still didn't know. He said, "Oh, where do you want to take this?" I said, "I didn't even mean to do this, so I have no idea really." But anyway, fortunately, Stuart was more on the ball than me, and he's like, well, we need to get you talking to people about this. And and it just grew from there.
Yep.
Organically. Really kicked off after Landline did the story on me. So that's when it just went through the roof.
And tell us about sort of, like you say, blows up, and then to now what you're doing with it now, obviously on the road, talking all over the shop, and we'll get into the bog breaks and the podcast and everything else you do, but sort of the setup and the structure and how you decided you were going to start rolling it out and offering it to communities. How have you set it all up?
Yeah, so we're now a registered charity, and I spend a lot of time on the road travelling, but at this point I've got a couple of staff as well to help now, because I guess for the succession of the organisation, I can't drive around the country forever. There's going to be a limit there somewhere. So it's building other programs now that we can roll out that have the same basis or have the same, I guess, values and philosophy that I started with, that we can roll out to different age groups of men around the country, and I guess keep it going so it's not all falling on me to do every single thing.
Yep.
But getting someone to help with admin and that has been a game changer. And I know the first girl that helped me with admin, she said, I have no idea how you ever did what you do plus what I do.
Yeah.
She said, and I said, I'll tell you.
Like you said, working for free
with very little sleep.
I'll tell you, it's called 4.5 hours sleep. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So it's grown and grown, and the calendar is booked out 12 months in advance. Literally, that minimum of 8 to 12
Mary,
months in advance.
you sound like you've grown incredibly passionate about this, and obviously as you started to go out and meet people, talk to them in a bit of a different light to the spraying stuff, the stuff that you're learning about mental health. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what have you learnt through these conversations that are now changing towards mental health?
I think over the years it was sort of, back in the day when I was younger, which is a bloody long time ago, it was that seen as that weakness thing, and no one talked about it and stuff. And, I even lost my best mate when I was 18 to suicide. So it's, even then I was like, why? I don't get this. This is, this is stupid. It's a, coward's way out. Why are you doing that? I didn't understand it. Now the things, I guess the stories that I hear and the people, and particularly the blokes from all walks of life, and I get to talk to politicians, football stars, celebrities, and I don't think I've even talked to anybody who's never been touched by it in some way. That everyone has their struggles, and I guess it's taking that practical approach that everyone with the bucket. When I talk about my buckets, and everyone's got a bucket and shit gets dumped in it, and sometimes it just gets too heavy. And when you sit back and think about it, I think, potentially in today's society there is maybe that tendency to too often self-diagnose with depression, and that when we're actually just going through a really shitty time in life and we can get through it, but we might need some help to do that. But I think there's so much, because I see a lot of people go, I've got depression. Well, actually, have you been diagnosed with that? And you know what? I think there's actually medical practitioners out there that are a bit fast to diagnose that too. When I see people who are really going through grief when they've lost someone, and particularly to suicide, they're like, I think I've got depression. It's like, you know what? You're actually allowed to be really sad. You're actually allowed to grieve. So don't confuse grief with depression. Yes, you might be bloody down in the dumps, and that's okay, and that's normal. So I think a big part of what I try and make people feel is how normal it is that everybody goes through some rough times. Some are rougher than others.
And it's similar with anxiety. Like there's diagnosed anxiety, and we were having an interesting conversation the other day.
Yep.
And it was around a similar sort of thing where you're talking about young people at school and things like that, and that self-diagnosed anxiety.
Yeah.
And it might be before an exam or before a test or something like that, and you're going, it's okay to be nervous.
That's normal.
It's okay to be anxious before something like that.
That's not anxiety.
That there's a big difference. Now, absolutely there is young people with diagnosed anxiety, not disputing that for a second, but the self-diagnosed, I've got anxiety because you're nervous before a test is very different to diagnosed anxiety that has an ongoing impact every single day.
That's, and I totally agree because, every second kid now's got anxiety. Do you? Do you really?
And it's okay if you do.
It's okay if you do, but don't just think because you're nervous or concerned about something or there's, you've got to build up to something that's true anxiety because they've, like you said, they're very different things. When I've got a bloke ringing me from the tractor who is in a full-blown anxiety attack and I have to tell him to stop the tractor, mate, turn it off.
Yeah, and talk him through breathing and
get out of the tractor and sit on the ground.
Yeah.
Take your boots off and wriggle your toes in the dirt and just focus on your toes. Just breathe and focus on your breath. And that's a whole different thing too.
That's anxiety.
I'm a little bit stressed about a test.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that cheapens it for the people who do suffer with genuine problems of those, serious anxiety. I think it cheapens it, and that concerns me.
With a lot of the blokes that you're talking to, we talk about undiagnosed depression and anxiety and that sort of stuff. How many of them are likely to, maybe be in a position like the bloke you just spoke about then that's on the tractor to then say, I need to go and see a GP and get myself sorted out and work out what's going on between my ears? Is that a logical or a likely step for those sorts of blokes, or they just?
I actually think the vast majority that I come across who, I guess, it's a range, but I think most of them, and making a gross generalisation here, but most of the guys I come across who are in trouble and are probably saying to themselves, I think I've got depression or whatever, they need an outlet. They need some way to empty that bucket. And the vast majority, if they actually stopped working, took a little bit of time for themselves and went fishing, or spent some time with some mates, or just had a yarn to somebody and talked about what's bugging them,
Get someone to get it a bit off their chest.
they go. You can see their shoulders lift, and I can hear them on the phone. I hear their voice change just when they get that shit out and just offload it.
Yeah.
So whether it's to me, whether it's to a counsellor, whether it's to their mates, whoever, I think a lot of problems could be solved by actually stopping and taking the time to just look after yourself that little bit.
To tip some shit out of the bucket, as you
Tip the
say,
shit out.
which
Get the shit out.
I think, mate, Mike and I, we have had the pleasure of hearing you speak a number of times now.
Yep.
And some of the stuff you talk about, and more so, like you say, it's easy in theory, but the way you explain it relates especially to blokes in such a way that they understand, they get it, they can picture it, they can feel it, and they know what you're talking about. There's so many great analogies in there. You've mentioned the buckets a little bit, but do you want to run us through it? Because there's probably plenty of listeners to Talkin Tough that know of you, maybe have seen you before, but there's also going to be plenty out there that this is the first time they're hearing Mary O'Brien. It would be great if you want to run us through some of the, I suppose, pieces of advice that you have for blokes especially, but anyone out there that is bogged, is stuck in that rut. Because I think some of those analogies and some of those concepts and messages are so practical and so helpful that it'd be great to run through some of them.
And I think that's the thing is I just try and normalise it that everyone goes through this. Everyone's got a bucket and they come in different sizes. Some people have got really big buckets so they can handle a lot of shit that gets dumped in their bucket, and some people have quite small ones and so it might fill up really fast. But they might be better at emptying it than the person with the big bucket. So I don't think it matters what size your bucket is.
Yeah, you're not better if you've got a big bucket.
Well, you might be better, but you might never empty it and it might fill up and fester.
And then a big bucket, when it is full, is heavier than a small bucket.
That's
full.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah, and so that's something that I talk about is the shit in your bucket, and not to let, try not to let other people put shit in your bucket, but that's what life is. Life is putting shit in, or shit landing in your bucket. But it's when you start putting shit in your own bucket and making it worse that it's not a good idea. But I think the most important part of that is how do we manage that shit that's in the bucket and the stuff that we can get out. So that might be just stress and worry about bills or kids or family or whatever. But there are some really major things that can happen in people's lives that will go in that bucket. And I believe it's okay for that stuff to stay in that bucket. But we need to be able to manage it and, I guess, pack it properly.
I don't think you're ever going to have an empty bucket. I think that concept in itself is unrealistic.
Ridiculous.
Like Mike here with no legs, like he's not going to go, that pain that I go through every day, mate, and I'm speaking for you here, but for me, not being able to see.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely spot on.
Or the loss of loved ones and things like that. You don't just tip that out and go, oh, that's gone now.
No,
like it's always going to be there.
It's always management versus overcoming. It's not like you ever overcome that.
No, you never.
It's something that you live with.
No, that's right. And I think
I like that thing you just said before about packaging it up. Right?
Yeah, it's a really important part of my presentation when I do the buckets demonstration, and I have the little cup and I press a bit of scrunched up paper down the bottom and say, it's okay to have some shit down the bottom that never goes away. That's okay, and that's normal. I think it's unrealistic to have a clean bucket. I just don't think that's life. And
anyone who says that they do, I reckon, is full of shit.
They're full of shit. And some of the things that in the people that I deal with that might be down the bottom of their bucket. So I get to talk to a lot of adults around the country who've lost a lot of parents, I guess, who've lost an adult child to suicide. That shit is never leaving their bucket, ever. But what happens is over time they get better at managing it and packing it. They know what triggers that to come up. It might be the anniversary, birthday, whatever, a particular place or a memory or a photo will trigger that to float up to the top, and it's very, raw again. But then over time they learn skills of how to put it back down the bottom of the bucket or into the bucket neatly, that it's not controlling every single waking minute of their life. Initially it is, but over time they get better at managing it, but it never goes away. Now, I had a father, at one of my events came up and spoke to me, and 8 weeks before I got there, he'd lost his son. And he stood there for 45 minutes and talked to me and cried. And when he started to tell me, I said, mate, I wish I could say or do something to make your pain go away, but I'm sorry to tell you, it never will. And that's when he started to cry. He said, thank you. He said, you're the first person who's been honest with me. He said, everybody keeps saying, you'll get over it. He said, I can't even imagine how I will. I said, I can't imagine how you will either, mate. But with time, you will get better at managing when it floats up and when it goes back.
Yeah, it's funny that
but it'll never go away.
We were only up in Rockhampton just earlier this week, and after the gig, Q&A, got asked a similar sort of question around what do you say to someone who is in that rut, in a bad spot mentally, if you don't have the answers? And like the answer we gave was, you don't lie to them.
Don't lie.
Don't lie.
If you don't have the answer, you
say,
I don't know. I don't know when or if you're ever going to be okay, or if this is ever going to go away. But that's the honest truth, and that is quite often the best response. But I think as well, and it'd be good to get your thoughts on this, I reckon sometimes that is what contributes to the hesitation of asking someone if they're okay, or asking someone that you're concerned about, you notice the change in behaviour and whatever that is, to go, mate, talk to me, because you don't want to ask because you don't feel like you've got the answer.
Yeah, and I do get a lot of people say, I don't know what to say. Like, I know my mate's in trouble, but I don't know what to say. And my answer is, don't say anything. Like, if you don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, mate. But I can listen.
Yep.
And if you want to offload that shit out of your bucket, let's do it. Keep talking. Keep asking questions that require an explanation. If you don't understand it, then start asking that. But there's no right and wrong answer. But listening and sitting into the silence, I think, is a big thing for men. But understanding that men and women communicate differently, they learn and grieve and heal differently. So
talk to us about that.
Sorry,
You're
frog
right,
in my throat. So I think the major issue that I see, and again, I'm not a bloody expert. I'm an ag scientist. I don't know anything. I can pick up lambs. The major issue that I see with mainstream services is that they are targeted to the way women operate, the way women learn, grieve and heal, not the way men do it. And I think we need things that work for both. We need things that work for kids, teenagers, whatever. But
It needs to be customised.
There's nothing out there that works for men.
One size fits all approach.
And do you think that's because it's
The one size fits all.
designed and built by women?
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
Do you think it's also very for lack of a better term, urban?
Oh, totally.
It doesn't have the same. I've heard you speak. I love the way that you're able to use analogies, and you see blokes go, you see people in the crowd when you talk, and they're going, they're nodding and they are taking it all in because you're speaking their language, and you're using terms and references that they're just going to go, yeah, I get that,
And make
That
it
makes
practical.
sense. You're making it practical.
They're practical. And I say to people, because people sometimes say to me, oh, you need some more information brochures to hand out. I say, why? These blokes don't learn by reading. They learn by seeing.
They're going to start the fire with it. It's going to go in the kindling pile.
Yeah, they won't even take it home. So there's no point in me printing glossy brochures for blokes to read because honestly, maybe 15%, 10 to 15% of them might read it, if that. The majority of the men that I deal with learn by seeing and doing. So if I want to teach them how to drive a tractor, I do not give them a manual, I show them. We get in the tractor and I'll show them how to drive it. That's what you do with these blokes. And in agriculture, it's huge. So in the general population, you might find about, I think, 15% of people overall will learn that way. But in agriculture, 70 to 80% of them learn that way. So they learn differently. So unless you tailor things, and I learned this with my spray drift stuff, they don't think you understand until they show you. So they can ring you up and tell you about the damage to their crop from spray drift. They can send you photos. They can send you an email. They can send you all the spray records, everything they've got. But until you walk out there into that paddock with them and they can show you, they don't think you understand. And so, that's a really important thing for them to see stuff, to understand it. And I could talk about that buckets theory in my presentations, but I show them. That's why I use the buckets. They can see me dropping the balls into the buckets and filling up the bucket.
Yep.
And the different size balls for different things in life, whether it's just bills or whether it's a death in the family. So they can see that visual thing. They're visual learners. They're like, I get it. And yeah, it's just practical stuff. So
we talk a little bit about suicide, but if you take it maybe a step back from that and you're talking about general mental health and going through tough times and optimizing those things, you mentioned before, around whether it's going down to the pub or going fishing, how important, given that the pressure that they're under and the workload that they have to do every single day, they get up at Sparrows and they're going to bed at, the late hours. They don't probably look after themselves all that well. How important is it to make sure that you carve out time for pleasurable things in their life?
I think it's critical.
And is there a reluctance or a willingness to even, accept that?
Well, there's not. Look, they want to do this stuff, but we have this society that puts all this pressure on men and says, they're very supportive of women doing things. So supportive of a girl's night out or a ladies' lunch or a girl's weekend or something. But as soon as the blokes want to go on a fishing trip or a footy trip, there's all this eye rolling and tisking.
Yeah.
And so we have a society that doesn't support men to do this. We also have this built-in gene in men, I believe, that they are too focused on looking after everybody else around them. It's that protector and provider thing that's come down through millennia that they need to do everything. Oh, I better go and do some more work this weekend. And I'm like, no, go fishing or do something.
Do something for you.
Do something for you. But, I laugh with the blokes in my talks and say, but I'm not giving you permission to bugger off fishing every weekend and neglect your family and all these other things.
Yeah, don't misinterpret this either.
This is not a free ticket to fishing.
Go back to the towns and go, a town full of professional fishermen these days.
It's funny because one of the communities that I went to they'd done it really, really tough with bushfires and stuff. And one of the ladies, I did a ladies' talk and then also a men's talk, so split them up. And we got a message through a week or so later because it was in early December that I'd been to this area. And one of the ladies messaged through and said, thank you for coming to our community. I think all the men will be getting fishing rods for Christmas. So... So yeah, it was really
not a bad result. Making just provided that they end up going and using.
Yeah, now they got to use them.
It's I guess as society we have to almost give men permission to look after themselves.
Yeah,
you can go out there and say, oh, you've got to do all this mindfulness stuff and that, But fishing is actually a mindfulness. It's a meditation.
Is.
Yeah,
And-
it doesn't have to be what first pops into your mind, which is sitting on a beach on a yoga
Cross-legged.
mat, cross-legged, with your arms up in the air going,
And I think that's, they're the sort of things that I say to blokes is, what do you like to do for fun? If you could have a weekend to do something, what are you going to do? Is it go fishing? Is it, go and watch your kids play sport? Is it, sit on a mountain and meditate? I don't care what it is, but find your thing that you empty your bucket so you can come back and say, oh, beauty. For some people it's gardening. For some people it's listening to music or something like that. But what is it that just, chills you out? Some blokes it's riding a motorbike. Just out on
some blokes it's full-blown adrenaline.
or some blokes it's just that quietness or blowing the cobwebs out of their head sort of thing, as they say to me. I've got a Harley. How long since you rode your Harley? Oh, probably 6 months. Why?
Yeah.
Why have you got the Harley? Just take an hour or so. It doesn't have to be all weekend or whatever. Just make that time to do that little thing for you, because when you do that, then you're in a better place to really look after the people around you.
Yeah.
And care for your family, and that when you actually look after yourself. And it's the same with physical health as mental health. Go to the doctor and get a checkup. Go fishing. Take that time to look after your mental health. That might be catching up with the boys on a Friday night for a beer or something.
Could be a conversation.
It could be a conversation. It could be a cup of coffee. It could be going for a walk or a run, whatever it is. There's thousands of things out there.
There's no right or wrong.
There's no right or wrong, but I think society, and I've had quite a few blokes say this to me, everyone tells me I need to talk to a counsellor or psychologist, but I don't want it. I'm not enjoying it. I don't like it, but I'm doing it because everyone tells me that's what I should do. And I said to him, can you go for a walk? Just go for a walk, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you like fishing? Yeah, I love fishing. Well, do that. I've got a mate in North Queensland who makes the most sought-after hand-carved fishing lures in the country. That's it. And he didn't realise. So I said to him, this is your meditation.
It's relaxation.
He
right?
just sits and hand carves these lures and doesn't make a lot of them, but it's his little quiet time.
Yeah, that doesn't matter how many you make, as long as it's doing more for him than it is for the people buying the lures.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's not even interested in selling them, really. People say, oh, have you got a Facebook page? He's like, yeah, follow me on that. He doesn't have a Facebook page. So it's that sort of, anything.
Just something for him.
Something for him.
Yeah.
And speaking about you, mate.
Yes.
Because I think
here we go.
Yeah, here we go. You know where I'm going to go here is us in this space, we have a lot of heavy conversations.
Yep.
And you've got your own buckets.
Yeah.
And what do you do to empty your bucket out? Because as you said, you've given a whole heap of ideas for the blokes out there listening about finding what they do. But when do you, how good are you at sort of monitoring when yours are getting full? And then what do you do to empty them out?
I would like to think that I'm pretty good at it. I guess one of the really important things in what I do and what you guys do is you've got your bucket and the shit in your life that gets dumped into your bucket, but those heavy conversations and stuff that you have with other people, that does not go into your bucket. You have to have a shit shoot, and that goes past you. So we can still listen, we can still empathise, and we can still hear these people.
You don't take it with you.
But we don't take their shit into our bucket, because otherwise we're going to get bogged.
Yeah, your bucket gets full real quick.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that sometimes some of those are not so real, raw.
Like
or,
that 45-minute, we used to that
impactful.
conversation with that gentleman before.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And so that's, those sort of conversations, you're going to get a bit of splatter on you.
Yeah.
Even if it's going down the shit chute, you're still going to get a bit of splatter. But it's being self-aware enough to know, you know what, I'm done.
Get rid of most of it.
Yeah, I've got to, and for me, so emptying my bucket is gardening. So for someone who's away for a third of the year, I have a pretty spectacular garden. Apparently, I just found out recently that's actually called green therapy. Who knew?
Yeah, right.
Who knew?
Yeah.
So
they'll come up
like
with a name for anything these
Like
days.
the old
Won't
mental
they?
health saying, a really great one we trot out a lot is, if you're feeling blue, touch green.
yeah, right.
And it's the same thing. Get outdoors, get away from the screens and all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah, well, I've got a little quote thing on a plate on my place that says, you can bury a lot of problems with dirt. So
There you go.
Love it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Gardening wouldn't be, it's amazing how many gardeners there are. I tell you,
Well,
'cause you
it's-
ask people and they're
it's
like, I love
grounding.
to be in my garden. Like it's a really
Yeah.
therapeutic thing to do.
It
Or
is.
making lures, like you said before.
Yep. So gardening for me, and so I'm pretty good at knowing when I need to leave that phone inside and just say, you know what,
Yeah.
whatever happens today, it's happening on the bench inside.
Yeah.
It's not coming outside with me, and I'm out in the garden.
Zero stress,
Yeah,
no
just
expectation
out
on your
there
time,
planning
not
these
much thinking.
grand gardens and forgetting that I live in a hot, dry climate, not in England somewhere where I can have these magnificent climbing roses or something. So my imagination in my garden gets the better of me, but and also driving. So fortunately, driving is one of the things that empties my bucket. Long, straight, flat roads, not windy, hilly roads,
Yeah, and not city roads.
and not city roads.
Stay away from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I suppose that also leads us into something that you've started more recently, which is your bog breaks. Tell us about how you came up with that idea and a little bit about them.
Yeah, so the bog breaks is a getaway that we run for blokes who are doing a bit tough or had a bit of a rough trot, and they can self-identify or people can dob them in to come along to our bog breaks. And again, that's one of the, I guess, building other programs apart from just my speaking gigs. And the concept of the bog breaks I had for a few years, but I just didn't have the money to do it. But what we do is, we've got a page on our website for bog breaks, and there's a video on there of guys that have been to the first one, as a testimonial of what they found and how it helped them. But some people say it's a bit secretive. Well, it is a little bit secretive because I don't tell them what we do at bog breaks. We don't tell them until they get there, and they only get told every morning what they're doing the next day or that day. So it was an idea that I thought would work. A lot of other people didn't and doubted that you could bring 20 blokes from all different walks of life from all over the country together and expect it to work. But it works even better than I even thought. And so what we are building is like a brotherhood. We get them in there, we peel away the layers of the onion, we push them outside their comfort zone, we teach them skills, all different ways to manage their bucket of shit. And one of the important things is to get some of the shit out of their bucket, and probably some of that stuff that's down the bottom that they packed away and maybe they never actually picked it up and had a good look at it and acknowledged it or accepted it and said, you know what, that's going to be in my bucket forever.
But that's okay. And I'm now understanding the impact that that's having.
Yeah, and so they come along on that first afternoon and they're kind of bunny in the headlights, terrified, or what have we signed up for? And we, I guess, build friendships over that weekend. The first night it's sort of like, oh, g'day, where are you from? What are you doing?
How's the weather at your job?
By Sunday night, we have what I call peeling onions. Everyone's crying. No one wants to leave. Sorry, boys, you got to go
And
home.
I bet they stay in touch long after they've gone.
They
right?
do.
And that's why that community element
that's that
you just said
brotherhood.
before is amazing.
Yeah. And one of the things, so we have a debrief on the Sunday afternoon. We have a intro session on the first afternoon where we set it up and what the expectations, because obviously there's 20 blokes that may not get along or whatever. So we have behaviour expectations, etc., and set all that out. But one of the things I say to them is these blokes are not in your community. They don't know your wife or your ex-wife or your kids or your business. So these are blokes that you can offload to.
Yeah.
And there's no judgment here. You might not connect with everybody, but guaranteed that you will find blokes here that you will connect with, and they do. And they're keeping in touch and swapping numbers. And we also have a private Facebook group for those blokes who have been to bog breaks to stay in touch. And we follow their journey in that, and they are allowed to post funny shit and dumb shit. And
that's an outlet too. Laughter, humour,
yeah, and
taking the piss.
And we get guys who, post updates of, we sort of know their story from bog breaks, and they get to meet each other in there. And so we've got the different groups of bog breaks boys all meeting in there as well, and connecting, because when we put a fresh lot in there, I say, righto, boys, put a head and shoulders photo of yourself below and say where you're from. And you've got other guys going, oh, you're only 25 minutes from me. Mm-hmm. Oh, do you want to catch up and have a beer? And so
Perfect.
And so we've got this brotherhood, guys from, the different groups meeting each other, and some of the blokes have gone in there and said, "Oh, I need someone to work, do this job or work on the farm or whatever it is." Other blokes going, "Well, I'm looking for a job," or "My son needs a job," and things like that. So
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah,
it is. It's really cool to see those boys, and some of them have got serious health problems, and so they put updates in there, or their kids have got health problems, and they've got those other blokes there to support them and go, good on you, mate. You're doing incredibly well. You'll get your license back one day or whatever. Like it's that supportive network of the brotherhood, I guess. And the other thing that came out of it that I sort of didn't really anticipate but is bigger than I expected is that when they go back to their communities, they become sort of mental health leaders and examples and able to help other blokes in particular. It's changed family dynamics. I've had some of these, wives and partners, when I've met them, have just come up and hugged me and said, "Thank you, you gave me my husband back."
Yeah, it's amazing.
He just wasn't the person that I married before he went to bog breaks, and he's come home with a different outlook on life. And we don't make their problems go away, and we can't do that. But we can change their attitude to it, or help them change their attitude to it.
And give them some tools that...
Yeah, give them some tools. And people in their workplaces, like blokes who own businesses, have gone back and said, "Right, I think I've been a bit of an arsehole and been too hard on all you blokes. If anyone needs some time off to go and see a counsellor or psychologist, come and see me, not a problem. Things are going to be done differently." And
If anyone wants to go fishing this weekend, you can have Friday off.
and so we get this sort of change that ripples through the community. And even blokes have said, "Oh, I must be, wearing a hat now that says come and chat to me," because blokes are coming up and saying, "Oh, I heard you went to that bog breaks thing, and yeah, I've been doing it pretty tough," and they start emptying their bucket. And so we've got that sort of ripple effect through the communities across Australia.
amazing.
So that's pretty cool.
That's very... And
Love what
where do you
you're doing.
where do you
That's
host
so
them?
Up in the Fraser Coast region, yeah. And so anyone or the blokes can apply on our website.
Yep.
And blokes can apply for themselves, and if they're a bit iffy and a bit scared to come by themselves, they can bring a mate. And it's even better if you bring a mate who's probably been through a rough trot as well.
Yeah, 100%.
And a variety of things like, it could be floods, droughts, fires. It can be, we've had blokes who've lost children. We've had blokes who've had, been working hard all their life and then suddenly got a serious illness, things like that. So it's a diverse group, and I always say the hardest thing I have to do every single year is decide on who gets to come.
Yeah, that is the hard part. I wouldn't wish that job upon anyone.
Really shit job.
I reckon what you're doing is amazing, Mary. And you said before that there's only one Mary O'Brien. Wish there was more. You definitely have an alternative approach to mental health, but clearly it works and people understand and get it. And as you said, there's amazing support services out there, and there's something for everyone. But for these blokes, this sort of stuff seems to be working.
Yeah, there just doesn't seem to be anything that's specifically tailored to men. And that was some of the feedback, because we get an independent person to sit these guys down on the last night if they want to. There's no pressure, but if they want to, they can get some feedback on a video, and they can say whatever they want, really. And one of the guys said in one of the things, he said, there's all of these people out there saying they're doing stuff, but, Are You Bogged Mate is actually doing something. And it's small. We can't take hundreds of blokes, but we hope to do more and more of these in the future. Initially, I was going to run them in every state, but it's too hard logistically to find locations at work, because I was very picky about the location and things like that. Like a fire pit was my thing. So everything was built around the fire pit. So every night those men get to sit around a fire pit, which is, there's documented evidence in the benefits of sitting around a fire for men. It's a primal thing, and it's a really, really important thing. And so that was my first criteria. Well, there's not a lot of fancy hotels that let you have a fire pit.
Poolside.
Yeah. So I was like, So where I've got it works, the recipe works. We have our suppliers there for the different activities we do, because we do have a shitload of fun. It's not all lectures and, mental health stuff at all. There's some downtime. There's some fun activities and building that brotherhood, so bonding sort of things. But none of it's textbook stuff. It's all stuff that I've come up with and said, this would be good on the first day, this will be good on the last day, and structured it in a way that we just slowly crack the nut on the first day or that first afternoon and peel away the layers. And, yeah, by Monday morning when they've got to leave, they're all crying and hugging and they just don't want to go. They've just, it's
magnificent.
It's pretty awesome to watch as a facilitator. And I have some amazing men who come and help me facilitate that because I can't wrangle 20 blokes by myself with, we've got to get them to different locations and that. So we have, I've got a couple of absolutely amazing blokes who come and help me do that. And what we're starting to do now is bring back blokes from previous bog breaks to help facilitate. So these are guys who've been through this. They've been to bog breaks. They know what it's about. They know what we're trying to achieve. They know what they got out of it. And so they come back and help facilitate that to happen for other blokes to have those tough conversations. They know where we're going. They know the process of slowly breaking down the barriers over the weekend and, different personalities. So I don't have all the facilitators the same,
Yeah, some people are going to connect with other people better and all that
and
sort of stuff.
There's guys who are going to come who want to just sit and talk to me. There's guys who are not going to connect with me, and that's fine. So a range of facilitators that can help with that weekend, and they're a really critical part of it, of that weekend as well. And also my job is to manage their mental health and their buckets so that, I have to prepare them for that experience to say, you can't take the shit that you hear this weekend into your bucket. And so touching base with them and having debriefs with them afterwards to make sure that they're still make sure they're not getting bogged too, because there's some pretty heavy conversations at bog breaks.
Yeah, bloody oath. And that doesn't mean that those facilitators, yourself, us, doesn't mean we don't care in those conversations.
No,
like
that's
you say, you're listening, you're empathising, you're there, you're present, but it's just having the ability for that shit not to be carried with you and weighing you down.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm sure there is plenty of people that'll be listening to you explaining bog breaks and be going, fuck, this sounds like something that could be good for me or could be good for a mate.
Yep.
And as you've said, they can go on the website. Is there costs involved? How does all that work?
All they've got to do is get themselves to an airport where they can catch a Qantas flight, and we pay for their flights, we pay for accommodation, we pay for all the meals, everything. So we do have terms and conditions, like you can't come up there and decide you're going to turn up on the second day or whatever. You've got to come for the whole thing.
Yeah, you've got to commit.
You've got to do the whole program. Yep. It's not a, slip in on the second day and out on the third day kind of thing. You have to commit to that. But we pay for all the costs. Yep. If you want to go and visit friends and family before or after bog breaks, that's fine. But we have a time frame that they have to commit to that 4 days of being there and being part of that. They aren't allowed to leave it, but leave during it or whatever. So if they need stuff, we can get that for them. But everything is provided, no cost except just get to an airport.
That's unreal, because I think there's probably so much financial pressure that is often linked to people struggling.
That is exactly right.
And the last thing I suppose people need, or an extra barrier to be, is, hey, yeah, this would be really good, but there's a price tag attached to it.
And we still get that question. With the first year, we didn't really say that we were going to pay for the flights, because I was like, a bloke's just going to apply just to go and get a free holiday sort of thing. So we didn't really advertise it. We did last year advertise it, but still, I still get blokes go, even when we contacted them last year and like, how much is it going to cost? Nothing, mate. Because like you said, there's so much financial pressure out there. The last thing we want to do is put financial pressure on blokes who are struggling.
Yep. And
the current cost of living, and particularly if they've got families and stuff like that, that's just the last thing they need. So it just lifts that burden off them if we can pay for all of that. So they're not cheap to run, but they're the impact that we see. And I went to a thing last year where there was sort of all of these professional business people, and they're like, scalability, you need to scale this up. I said, I'm going for quality, not quantity. So I'm not trying to get 100 blokes through in one go. I want 20 to have the best experience they can, and have quality. So
And as
You
said
lose the
before-
impact and connection if you've got 100 blokes there.
well,
But
you can't, you
yeah.
cannot wrangle 100 blokes to build the kind of bonds that we're building with 15 to 20.
And I think that what you said before, the unintended consequence, when you said was when they go back to their communities, they have
Yep.
a skill set that is going to filter on through that community as well.
Yeah, it's
so
not just the direct
it's almost
15.
training. Like it's like indirect training, I guess.
It is, yeah.
Giving them a skill set that they can pass on, and then everyone benefits.
And
So
I mean, I
it's
never
like
want.
having 20 champions you've just trained up that you're
Well, that's
sending
it.
back out.
We're sort of creating champions, but we don't want to put that burden on them that they have to be that or they have to, be that for their community or their workplace or whatever. But it's just little, I guess, teaching them those skills of things to look for. And just a few weeks ago, I had one of the guys from Bog Breaks contact me and he said, you know how you talked about those signs and symptoms? He said, I've just pulled up a mate, just pulled him up from taking his life. And I
Stop
said,
him in his tracks.
Yep. And so he said he's on social media. He doesn't post much on there, never posts anything on social media, but he is on there. And he said, then I saw him just one night just posting all of this stuff on Marketplace trying to sell stuff. And he said something in my brain went, oh, shit. Now, Mary said something about blokes tending to clean out the shed and get rid of stuff. He said, so I rang him up. And he said 3-hour phone call and he said we were in tears, both of us. And he said I went and spent the weekend with him just to let him empty his bucket. He said, but I saw just that one little thing. And he said something in my head went, hang on, that's not normal.
Change of behaviour.
And he said, I immediately rang him and he said, 3-hour phone call. So just little things like that. So they don't have to be out there, this big mental health advocate thing, but they just noticed that one little thing in a mate.
No, it's so valuable.
And had the courage to pick up the phone.
And had the
And I think
he said, I'm
potentially-
going to ring him right now. So, yeah.
But potentially without bog breaks, you might notice and go, "That's a bit weird," and you just let it go.
Yeah.
And
Always
I
having a
think-
good cleanup.
Yeah, that is very bloody impressive, mate, and keep up the great work. I
It's
think
amazing.
before we wrap up with our final question, I think there's going to be, as I said, plenty of people. We'll put all the links in all the show notes below with the details about bog breaks, the website, things like that. And
The article as well.
Yep, the article. But even your events, your speaking, how do people sort of get in touch? How does that work?
Through the website. There's a contact form on the website. All goes through to Jenny and she wrangles all that. And the only advice there is book early because it's we do get people who are like, oh, can Mary come in 3 weeks' time? Jenny's like, not a chance in hell. It's sometimes if I'm on a run like this and I do have a spare day, we can slot one in, but that's fairly rare.
And that's if it works location-wise, time-wise. There's a lot of
so we
things that have
don't
to line up for that to work.
Again, we try and save money and we don't sort of drive to Victoria for one event. We make a run of it and make it worthwhile while I'm down here, which is why I'm on the road for 3.5 weeks. But, through the website's the best way to do that. Even if they message through the social media and that, it'll pop up with a message saying please email through the admin email to.
Yeah, beautiful.
So Jenny's got it all in one place when she's coordinating stuff, and there's a fair bit of logistics that goes into that, organising all of those trips and motels and just
all the logistics.
all of the stuff.
Nah, 100%.
There's a lot of stuff, and she's got to sit there with Google Maps open and say, right, can she physically get from this place to this place? And allocating enough time. So it's
Need more Marys and more Jennies.
I don't know if that's a good idea.
Maybe one Mary's enough.
We're troublemakers, really.
No, I love it. It's awesome, Mary.
Hey, to finish off, you've had a swag full of probably amazing conversations, powerful conversations, but probably more importantly, tough conversations right around the country. And you've grown up with what tough was growing up to now sitting where you are today. What does tough mean to you today?
Ooh, it means so many things, but I think tough to me now is, and I suppose I'll put it in a fairly crass way, but it's probably owning your shit. It's owning your shit, and whether that's, if we've stuffed up, if someone's done something wrong, it's putting your hand up and going, I stuffed up. I did the wrong thing. I'm sorry, whatever. But it's also going, do you know what? This is the shit that's in my bucket. And I need to make peace with it, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to do what I need to do to make peace with that. So I think it's owning your shit, whether it's admitting you're wrong or admitting or accepting. I guess it's that acceptance of yourself and accepting this is the shit that's in my bucket. I'm sorry, it's in there, but you know what? I can't change it. I can't get rid of it, but I'm going to make the best of it.
Yeah, going to do something about it.
Great definition. Love it.
Love that. Hey, mate.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Really awesome
Thanks
conversation.
for having me, lads.
No,
Great to catch
you're
up.
the best. That was so good. And obviously the work that you do changes lives. I love the bog break stuff because it's more, you
It's
have that
so-
person
yeah.
saying, hey, Mary, why don't you scale this? Well, you are, really.
Well, we are, and we'll do a few more each year, I guess. But it's, the bog breaks thing is pretty special.
Yeah.
What we're
And I
doing.
think on that,
we've got other programs that we're working on to roll out as well. Different things that are going to target different age groups of men. So
And I think on the bog break stuff, as I was listening, I was thinking, like you say, quality over quantity, limited spots, 100% get that. But
Yeah.
for people listening that either maybe apply, don't get accepted, whatever it happens to be, or just thinks, oh yeah, that'd be cool to do one day, do it with your mates. Like, make the weekend to go away, and yes, you might not get the whole training that you provide as part of bog breaks, but a weekend away with your mates is
Yeah.
what we were talking about before when it's the time fishing. Like, this might be appealing to people listening because they haven't gotten away in so long.
yeah, so make the time to do that.
Yeah.
And we've had a great story recently with, you may have seen on our socials, the men's event over at Oyen, just south of Mildura. And so the bloke who organised that just went, you know what, I'm going on a fishing trip. Went to Darwin on a fishing trip. This other bloke on the boat on this fishing trip is wearing an Are You Bogged Mate fishing shirt. And he said, what's that about? And it was one of our blokes from Victoria who had been to bog breaks. And he said, oh, this is Are You Bogged Mate. I went to bog breaks, and he told him all about it. And he said, you should, when Mary comes down your way, you should get a group together. He said, oh, yeah, we might get 30 blokes together after footy training. 127 men came together, and all because the bloke I had at bog breaks, who I said, go fishing, he went fishing, and this other bloke over there went fishing, and they met in Darwin. That's
good's
how he
that?
heard about it on a fishing trip at Darwin. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely love it, mate. So like Mike said, like I said, thank you so much. Keep doing the work you're doing. Keep pulling blokes and people right around the country out of the bog, but more importantly, probably helping others help others do the same, which is just as important. And we will catch you on the road somewhere down the track.
Definitely. Thanks, boys.
Thanks, Mary.
Another fantastic conversation today. As always, if anything has triggered you in any way, shape or form, or you feel like talking about something, pick up the phone, call a mate, call a professional, or if that mate doesn't answer, you can always call Lifeline on 13 11 14. We'll catch you next time on Talkin Tough.
Thanks for tuning in. Everything you've heard in today's episode will be in the show notes below, where you click to play this episode. While you're there, why not chuck us a subscribe or follow? Catch you next time.